but I just found that I seem to be overlooked for team sports, and as much as I love playing football and cricket and all those type of things, I never really felt that I was given the opportunities through my school years, and I never really knew any different at the time. But it's when I look back, in hindsight, and I realised, what it was probably more of an issue than what I thought it was. And the longest I would ever want to run is 400 meters on our school running track, and that event I actually quite enjoyed. That on cross country days when we had games and it was like a cross country, I'd be the one hiding in the bushes, on the first lap and waiting for the other people to do the 3 laps, and then I'd rejoin them. So no, it was definitely not, it's the furthest thing from my mind, really.
Okay, sorry, just to delve into that a bit. So that what years are we talking? We're talking 1970s, your school years,
yeah. So so born in 62, and so yeah, sort of late 60s into the 70s. Yeah, so yeah.
So kids could be quite cruel back then, couldn't they?
Yeah, definitely different times, that's for sure. When I think of how things are today, totally different. But in those days, you just got on with it, and I'm not just saying I was the only one who's bullied. It just seemed to be any kid that was slightly different. They all got bullied as well. So I saw a lot of it going on, but that was just kind of the way it was. And as I say, you just considered it normal, and you just sort of got on with it, really. So but it's only when you sort of look back, as I say, with hindsight, and you kind of think why certain things happened or whatever, then the benefit of hindsight. And obviously, being an adult and seeing how things have changed over the years, how the world's changed massively, you realize just how much it did actually affect you. And really running, I mean, I left school, I started doing a university course as part of my day job, and really running was the last thing from my mind. But one thing that I did do at that time was I was still doing martial arts. So I did kung fu for a few years, and I'd also started to go down the gym to do circuit training and a bit of weight training. So if you like, I'd always sort of wanted to, in a way, look after myself and keep fit. I guess what I didn't realise by doing those two different forms of activity, that would actually give me a really good base to what was, for what was to come in terms of long distance running. And how I got into running was literally, I saw a poster advertising the first Coventry Marathon in 1981. And at the time, I was spending sort of 2 or 3 nights a week down the pub with my mates, going to nightclubs. I was a punk rocker. I was into my punk music and all that sort of stuff. And it was great. Really was enjoying, living my sort of late teens up to 19, and seeing this poster and thinking Coventry Marathon, first Coventry Marathon. I'll have a go at that. Made a bet with a few of my mates down the pub, that I could do it. And it was only sort of 5 or 6 weeks before the event, and I signed up and thought, I better start doing a bit of running. So ironically, I found that I was just running around the school running track that I used to run around when we used to have games when I was at school. So I thought, well, I better do more than one lap. So I built up to 20 laps, sort of 5 miles ish, and that's all I did. I just did that 3 or 4 times a week. And on marathon day, ignorance was bliss, really. I had no idea how to prepare for a marathon, or indeed how to run it, or what it was going to do to me. And I got to 14 or 15 miles thinking, it's not too bad. I built up, I probably got a good general level of fitness from my gym work and my martial arts as well. But oh boy, when I got to about 16 miles and my legs turned to gateposts, I very, very quickly realised just how difficult a marathon distance was. I kind of run, jogged, walked the last 10 miles, sprint finish over the line. Thought I'd conquered the world, felt elated and what have you. Didn't quite make the 3.5 hours time goal that I'd set myself prior to that. But that didn't matter. Got my medal and certificate and all of that lot. And that was it. And I thought, brilliant. Really had an enjoyable day. The camaraderie was brilliant. But the next day when I got out of bed, I could not walk. hardly walk. I had to go down the stairs backwards. I'll never forget it. My feet were that sore because I didn't wear proper running shoes. I just wear like trainers that you'd wear as five-a-side football in a gym, that kind of trainers. So they weren't even proper running shoes that I wore. My feet were just bruised to bits. And I guess it was probably 5-6 days, certainly by the end of that week, before I could actually walk, you know, not like
Wow.
Frankenstein. And for the first couple of hours, I was thinking, gosh, never, ever again. But it was only sort of when my legs had recovered and I felt recovered, actually, I thought, blimey, this is what I discovered in terms of running as a sport, as an activity. It did, in fact, give me a whole new self-confidence about myself, you know, on the basis that all the people I've met, all age groups, from all walks of life, you line up on that start line and basically you are all equals. Nobody treats you any different. And for the first time in my life, really, I just felt like respected is probably the right word, I think. And just how good it made me feel. So, yeah, that's what got me started into running. I tried different distances, realized I wasn't so good over the short distances, 5 or 10K. I never really became that fast. And my strengths really were in my stamina. So I went back to marathons and, yeah, tried to develop my skills in marathon running. And yeah, that's how it all started, really.
It's amazing to hear you say you were one of those never again people. I mean, lots of people have been, but for you to say never again at the time, you must look back and think, well, maybe, you know, maybe I got that one slightly wrong then.
Yeah, I think, like you say, many people do say that, and then what they do realise is at the time, yeah, it's yeah, it does hurt and it does leave you in pain for quite some time. But yeah, you discover that, you know, there's a whole big wider picture there, and yeah, you realise the benefits and how it makes you feel, and not just sort of physically but mentally as well. You know, it's the whole mental health thing as well. And over the years, just being able to run, and also attend events, marathons, it's just been, you know, hugely powerful in sort of maintaining my mental health, as you know, as well as my physical health. So I found that really beneficial.
I suppose back then when you started, I mean, in many ways, it's a good time to start, wasn't it? Because that's the start of the running boom, wasn't it? 81 was also the first London Marathon. You know, there's hundreds of running clubs that were established in 1981 because of the London Marathon and that inspiration it gave. Did you look back and really think that was a factor in keeping you going, being part of this big movement?
I understood at the time that there was a running boom. It had come over from America, and I saw that most cities and towns within the UK actually had a marathon or a half marathon, and it was brilliant. The problem I had was I didn't drive. I wasn't driving at that time, so and you know, any event that I went to, I had to rely on public transport. So I was a bit, you know, guess I couldn't go to all the events that I would like to have gone, so I just basically stuck to the Midlands. But even in the Midlands, there was just so many races you could go to, in terms of, you know, what was available. When I compare that to today, it's just, yeah, it's just really sad to see. But you know, back then it was, you know, that's the way it was. But it didn't seem to last that long, really, relatively. And by the late age, when I eventually got back into running marathons more seriously, sort of 1988, I decided to try and run 12 marathons that year, one a month, to try and raise money for Great Ormond Street. And that's what got me onto the path of multi-marathon running, because it was during that year that I met a few guys from a club called the 100 Marathon Club. And their goal in life was to literally try and run 100 marathons within their lifetime. And back then, as the events were dwindling towards sort of late 80s into the 90s, it was a very, very difficult challenge, because logistically, just being able to travel to the various places throughout the year and for many years, you know, it was more of a lifelong goal that people were trying to attempt. What got me really interested was realizing that some of these people were sort of in their 40s and 50s or even older, and I was sort of this 26-year-old. And straight away, the old grey matter started working, and I'm thinking, I wonder if there's a world record for the youngest person to run 100 marathons.
Yeah.
And Yeah, there was, and it was a new record, and I thought, well, I'm gonna have a crack at that. So that 12 marathons I was supposed to run in 1988, and this was raising money, and people had sponsored me so much a marathon. I actually ended up running 20 that year.
Right.
So yeah, a few people had to pay up a little bit more than they expected, but essentially for me, it meant that I was, I'd started my journey into the world of multi-marathon running and trying to get this record. It took me 2.5 years. So December 1990, I achieved that record at the age of 28. So I became the youngest person to do that. It's been smashed to pieces now. I think 21 or 22, I think, is
Okay.
the current holder. And then from there, it was really about trying to find other records that I could break. And the next one I went for was trying to run the most in a year, most official marathon races in a year. And by this, it was 1991 at that point, and races were dying, and it was definitely not the amount that there was sort of 10 years prior to that. So invariably, it meant that I was now having to go abroad at weekends to try and
Mm.
find back-to-back marathons to run on the Saturday and the Sunday.
Mm.
I'm trying to hold down a full-time job, and I had a family, and Friday night I'll be disappearing on, driving down to Dover, jumping on a ferry, then driving to wherever, through France, Germany, Holland, Belgium, wherever there was a marathon that I had to run, then I'd be running that. And if there wasn't one back in the UK on the Sunday, staying over there and running another one somewhere else, and then catching a ferry back on sort of late Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, and hopefully getting back in time so I could get back to work on a Monday morning.
Wow.
And generally, some of the time there was a race back in the UK on the Sunday, which was a luxury really, because it meant at least I was back in the UK on Sunday, and then I knew I'd be back home sort of
Yeah.
early evening on, so I could get a good night's sleep. But I mean, there was no internet back then. All race entries had to be done with fax and application forms and postage, and there was no email or anything like that. Online entry fees, nothing like that. So everything had to be done with banker's draft for foreign currency, or checks in the post with a stamped addressed envelope if it was a UK race. There was no common currency, so I was traveling around Europe for a year with like 12 different currencies in my wallet, from